Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to continue the Through the Ages series, where we take a look back at balance and design changes that civilizations have undergone between their original release, in this case 2012, and today, as of 2024. This time, we're going to be looking at a big one, the Indians. Now right away, we hit a snag, which is the original Indian civ no longer exists in the game, having been effectively broken up into 4 different civilizations with the Dynasties of India release. That said, for all intents and purposes, the original Indian civ was effectively replaced by the Hindustanis, with just bits and pieces of the old design showing up in the Bengalis, Dravidians, and Gujars, especially in regards to the elephant archer, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Going back in time to 2012, just 7 days after the much hyped end of the Mayan calendar, and by extension of course the world, the Forgotten mod was released, giving us a first introduction to the Indians. Their initial design will no doubt seem quite familiar, but had some notable deviations from the Hindustanis today. First off, they had their villager discount, which was back then more modest, starting at just 5% and growing each age. Their fishermen then worked 15% faster and carried plus 15 food, and important to remember is this is back before a villager could drop off fish at a dock, so that extra carry capacity was more handy than it sounds. It was very common, for example, after a villager built a dock, to collect their full carry capacity of food from the shore before returning to your base. Their camels then had +1/+1 armor, which is a bonus that no longer exists in the game in any form, and their team bonus was that camels had +5 attack against buildings, with camel riders specifically having +6 as a hidden effect. At the castle, Indians then had the Elephant Archer as their unique unit, featuring solid HP, pierce armor, and a bonus +3 against all buildings, as well as an extra +3 against towers, walls, and stone gates. That's an aspect of the Elephant Archer that's actually completely absent today, and then the Indians also had the Imperial Camel at the stable as their second unique unit. As for their unique techs, they had very familiar ones, increasing all sources of gold income by 10%, and could then increase the hand cannon's range by 1. Now, while the idea of a camel civ with discounted villagers and long-range hand cannoneers was there from the start, if you're familiar with the current Hindustanis, you'll note that every single one of those units, techs, and bonuses has been changed in some way since then, still being tinkered with over 10 years later. One aspect that was particularly unique at that time was not having knights in the tech tree. American civs of course lack knights as well, but have the Eagle Warrior, and also became more archer and infantry focused, whereas this was a cavalry civ, missing the core Castle Age stable unit. Saracens were probably the closest to this by not having cavalier, but missing knights entirely and going camels as a knight replacement in Castle Age was a novel direction. Given knights have 2 more of each type of armor than camels, you could almost explicitly see that one of the Indians' bonuses was trying to make those units more similar. The general feeling around Indians at the time is they were pretty weak until fully boomed and could reach their powerful late game units, though this was way before the Republic stats to support those kind of perceptions. One critical issue Indians had was that camels as a unit class prior to African kingdoms in 2015 were dealt a fairly bad hand by the original devs. Not only did they lack the knight's armor, but they also took 5 extra bonus damage from town center arrows, 7 from towers, and 11 from castles extra arrows, which was further increased with heated shot. This fact alone made camels much less viable as a knight replacement than they are today. Similarly, the general feeling about elephant archers was they began by being a little bit weak, and at the time I described them as a worse version of the war wagon. Initially, Indians lacked the final armor upgrade, along with elephant archers being more expensive, attacking slower, moving slower, having a more expensive elite upgrade, and taking extra damage from anti-archer bonuses compared to today, while needing to be created at a castle to top it off. On the flip side, they did have a bonus against buildings, a bit more HP, and better accuracy, so they at least had some things going for them. The first big round of changes for Indians came along with the African Kingdoms DLC, roughly 2 years after the official release of The Forgotten. In that, it was clear Indians were deemed too weak on multiple fronts, and had one of the largest all-around buffs I can recall any civ getting in an HD expansion patch. First, their villager discount was increased by 5% every age, doubling its impact in Dark Age in particular. They then added guilds, temporarily added arrow slits before removing that later, as they were pretty liberal with that tech in the early days, and finally, I'd argue most importantly, added ring archer armor to the Indian tech tree, giving them one of the rare complete archery ranges. That was a big help for the Indians' Elephant Archer, Arbalester, which they had at the time, Hand Cannoneer, and Elite Skirmisher. The Elephant Archer then had its individual cost and Elite Upgrade's food cost dropped, along with some minor tweaks to its HP and Pierce armor to somewhat balance the addition of the Blacksmith tech. If all this wasn't enough, it's also when the camel and ship armor classes were split, with camels becoming much less punished by defensive buildings moving forward. Basically, everything about the Indians got better after African kingdoms, and looking back to a video I made at the time, I even commented that it felt like African kingdoms brought 5 new civilizations, with Indians given a new life. Heading into 2016's Rise of the Rajas DLC and accompanying patches, the devs clearly thought they had overdone it slightly with the Indians. Over the course of 2 patches, they then lost Arbalester, and their camel armor bonus was changed from +1/+1 to just +1 pierce armor. There were then a few more minor changes to the Elephant Archer's armor, and their unique architecture set and a new wonder were adopted. Prior to this, they had just had the Middle Eastern architectural style, like the Saracens or Persians, and a wonder that was kind of pushing the AoE2 timeline. The perception after these changes is they were overall a B-tier civ, but with a good eco bonus and a unique playstyle. Players knew they were dangerous in post-Imperial situations with arguably the best camels of any civ and could carry a team, but weren't overwhelming in the early to mid-game, especially in 1v1s. The most dramatic and controversial change for the Indians was yet to come though, in 2019's Definitive Edition. In a move that rocked the AoE2 world, the camel was renamed the Camel Rider, in addition to the Arbalest becoming the Arbalester. Some of us still try to keep the good fight alive and push back against the new names, and it was a difficult adjustment for the true veterans of the community. A few other small changes were then applied to Indians at this time of massive upheaval, with the Fisherman bonus being reduced to just a 10% faster work rate for the sake of balance on maps with lots of starting shorefish, along with docks becoming a drop-off point for fishermen. Elephant archers were then made a little cheaper and their attack rate was boosted, and another quiet change behind the scene was that the Indians' team bonus giving camels more attack against buildings was changed from the siege type of bonus damage and negated by masonry and architecture into the type of anti-building attack that infantry have, which isn't impacted by those techs. Previously, it had been possible for an enemy to basically counteract your team bonus in Imperial Age through the university. A few patches later, with yet another major rework, the devs then removed the last cavalry armor from Indians, hurting both the Hussar and camels, but modified their bonus to give +2 pierce armor in Imperial Age instead of just +1, to at least partly offset the nerf to the camel. Despite making their bonus appear stronger, this was definitely a nerf in the late game, acknowledging that Indians were starting to become a popular and overwhelming pocket civ in team games. By this point, they were even becoming sneaky good on open map 1v1s as well, and in early 2021 for example, despite being among the least popular Arabia picks, they were performing number 3 by win rate, which I admit is something I was slow to wake up to. Now all of this was building up to the major split that was going to occur in the Dynasties of India DLC. In an unprecedented move, maybe spurred on by criticism of the Indian civ encompassing too much historical diversity, Indians were of course split into 4 different civilizations, though not all equally inheriting the original Indians' design. This is when the Elephant Archer was then made into a regional unit for the Indian civs, excluding the Hindustanis, being moved to the archery range and having changes to its HP, pierce armor, accuracy, speed, training time, its anti-cavalry bonus damage, and finally losing its bonus against buildings. Going from a castle to an archery range unit involved almost a complete overhaul, making them cheaper and easier to mass, but in many ways individually weaker. Each of the spin-off civs then also received their own bonus or unique text to enhance it, and like the Eagle Warrior, there isn't really such a thing as a generic Elephant Archer, as there's always something extra at play and some sort of trade-off. This is also when the Armored and Siege Elephant were added, of course, as a regional substitute for the Ram line, taking more bonus damage from especially spear units, but otherwise being a bit better in melee fights and costing food instead of wood. I would say both regional units have been very well received and are a fun way to make the Indian civs feel a little extra unique. Of course, in the big breakup of the Indians, maybe the most interesting part is seeing how the pieces of the original Indian civ were transferred to the 4 variants. Hindustanis inherited most of the Indian tech tree, with a few exceptions, notably the addition of plate-barding armor again, helping out their Hussars and camels against ranged units. While that had originally been removed to beef up their camel armor bonus, that was replaced entirely with a new bonus letting their camels attack faster. They then received a lot of the Indians' bonuses, including the villager discount, the team bonus, which was reduced in strength from +4 to +2, and then expanded to include the team's light cavalry line, as well as then adding a new armor bonus for hand cannoneers. They also absorbed the Indians' 2 unique techs, with the one affecting the hand cannoneer range doubled to +2 range. To replace the previous unique unit, they then received a Gulam as an anti-archer specialist, combining elements of the Huskarl and Eagle Warrior. The caravanserai was then thrown in as a unique building for Hindustanis and later Persians, giving them another late game gold bonus, making a good late game civ with extra gold income from a unique tech even better in that situation for some reason. That said, the other Indian civs did manage to get bits here and there of the original Indian identity. Dravidians, for example, have a bonus for fishermen in fishing ships to carry plus 15 food, as well as keeping the previous Indian's castle and wonder. Gurjars then retain a bit of the camel identity, starting with a camel scout and having a bonus in unique tech targeting camels specifically. Bengalis then, for their part, take the elephant aspect of the Indians a bit further, though I would say they feel the most novel. All 4 Indian civs, though, retain the identifying feature of lacking knights, and having to find something else at the stable, or in the Bengalis' case at the castle, to fill a similar role. Immediately following that DLC, the results were extremely polarized, with Hindustanis and Gurjars as number 1 and number 2 on the ladder, and Bengalis then last, with Dravidians not doing much better. For the Hindustanis, though, as by far the clear continuation of the original Indian civ, it was undeniable that they were dominating, and the devs tried various nerfs, including removing halberdiers and reducing the Ghulam's HP. Finally, after 9 months of trying, they hit Hindustanis where it hurt in their villager bonus, reducing it to its original 5% discount in Dark Age, which immediately tanked Hindustanis from number 1 to surprisingly below average in performance. They've also since lost guilds, with their plus 10% gold generation unique tech now giving them better prices to buy and sell at the market, and there was some further tinkering to the Ghulam. Given the drop in the villager discount seemed to be the straw that broke the camel civ's back, so to speak, it was then partially restored to a compromise of minus 8%, and leaves us with where Hindustanis are today. The stats generally paint the picture of a very strong 1v1 and team game civ, and in the longest continuous balance patch recently from December 2023 to the start of March 2024, they were number 1 overall in 1v1 Arabia and team games, which is a pretty large sample size and tells us they're still top tier. The combo of camels and the Ghulam feels like a big part of that, with obviously their villager discount being incredibly flexible as well. They have a strong answer to both cavalry and archer civs, and even in theory, a good answer to infantry with their hand cannoneers. That'll do it for this retrospective though, and honestly, it's been quite the journey, even recently, having gone from number 1 to below average back to, it seems, number 1 on the ladder. They probably deserve the title of the most tinkered with civ ever, and that's even with ignoring balance changes to the other 3 Indian civs entirely. Shout out to James, Jared2142, Justin, Samantha, Stephen, Woodruff, and everyone else on Patreon, as well as the AV2 Wiki for its excellent organization of old patch notes. This was a lot to research and put together, particularly because of how much the Indians have changed and the fact they were renamed over the years. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.